Reorganizational meeting for Jersey Area School Board for December the 4th will come to order. Roll call, Mr. Enders.
Mr. Allen.
Present.
Mr. Burngard. Mrs. Calhoun.
Here.
Miss Edwards. Mr. McDonald.
Here.
Mrs. Peters. Here. Mr. Furman. Here. Mrs. Stemler. Here. Mrs. Thomas.
Here.
8 members present, 1 absent.
Justin for the pledge.
Good evening, Board, and welcome to our new members. We have 5 different members from our Key Club here this evening to lead us in the pledge. And the Key Club recently led our food drive for the community. And throughout the district, we brought in 35,782 pounds of food that benefited over 900 families. So we've got 5 of our ladies here to lead us in.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Come on up front, girls. This one. We have certificates for you, and your principal will want to get a picture. No, that's not being voted on. All right, next we're going to appoint Chris Kenyon as temporary chairperson for the election of president. Motion to start?
To appoint me.
Oh, need a motion to appoint Mr. Kenyon?
Motion.
Second. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Not in favor, like sign?
At this time, I'll accept nominations for the position of Chairman of the Board of Directors for Jersey Shore Area School District.
I'd like to make a motion. Mary Thomas.
I'd like to nominate Mrs. Stemler.
Make a motion to close nominations.
There's been a motion and a second to close nominations. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? At this time, we'll do a roll call vote, and what I'll ask is that each member, when their name is announced, to please identify the person that you're voting for. Again, it is Ms. Stemler and Ms. Thomas are the 2 nominations.
Mr. Allen.
Ms. Thomas.
Mr. Burngard. Mrs. Stemler. Mrs. Calhoun.
Mrs. Thomas.
Mr. McDonald.
Mrs. Stemler.
Mrs. Peters. Mr. Furman.
Mrs. Stemler.
Mrs. Stemler,
Myself.
Mrs. Thomas,
Myself.
Mrs. Stemler wins the vote 5-3.
At this time, I'll turn the position over to Mrs. Stemler. I'll kick you when you do something wrong, okay? So then we'll do the same thing, ask for nominations for vice president. No, just ask for nominations first.
Okay. Next, we will open it for nominations for vice president.
I'll nominate Harry Brungard.
Nominate Mary Thomas.
Make a motion nominations be closed.
Second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, nominations are now closed. We'll take a roll call.
All in favor?
Favor?
Yeah, we'll vote.
All in favor of closing nominations?
Aye.
Aye.
And can we have a roll call vote, please? Mr. Enders?
Mr. Allen,
Mr. Brungard.
Mr. Brungard,
Myself.
Mrs. Calhoun,
Mrs. Thomas.
Mr. McDonald,
Mr. Brungard.
Mrs. Peters, Furman, Mrs. Thomas, Stemler,
Mr. Brungard?
Mr. Brungard wins 7-1.
Next, we will open nominations for the Assistant Board Secretary. Can I,
Nominate Kayla Calhoun.
Question? Is this a paying position? I understand, no? No? Okay.
any other nominations? there-
Motion to close nominations.
And a second?
Second.
Can we have a roll call vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Any opposed? Mr. Enders, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Allen,
Ms. Calhoun.
Brungard.
Tim Calhoun. I'm sorry, Tim McDonald. Apologize, Tim.
That's okay.
Calhoun.
Myself.
Mr. McDonald.
Ms. Calhoun.
Mrs. Peters. Oh, I'm sorry. Furman. McDonald. Mrs. Thomas. Stemler.
Kayla.
Calhoun wins it 5-3.
Okay. Next, we're going to open up nominations for board treasurer.
Nominate Mary Thomas. A motion to close nominations.
Second that.
All those in
Well-
favor?
I have another nomination. Myself.
Well, we just,
Well, I was clarifying if I could nominate myself, sorry.
that's fine. So we have Mary and Tim. So we're closing nominations. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Can we have a roll call, please, Mr. Enders?
Mr. Allen.
Ms. Thomas.
Mr. Brungard.
Tim,
Mrs. Calhoun.
Mrs. Thomas.
Mr. McDonald.
Myself.
Mrs. Peters. Mr. Furman. Mrs. Thomas.
Me.
Mrs. Stemler.
Mary?
I'm voting. Else.
Since this is a tied vote, we're going to do a revote. Mr. Enders, can we have a roll call, please, again?
Mr. Allen.
Ms. Thomas.
Mr. Brungard.
Tim,
Mrs. Calhoun.
Mrs. Thomas.
Mr. McConnell. Mr. McDonald.
Myself.
Mrs. Peters. Mr. Furman. Mrs. Thomas. Mrs. Stemler.
Mary? That motion fails again, so we're going to try it one more time. We'll do a revote. Mr. Enders, can you do a roll call, please?
Mr. Allen.
Mrs. Thomas.
Mr. Brungard.
Tim,
Mrs. Calhoun.
Mrs. Thomas.
Mr. McDonald.
Myself.
Mrs. Peters. Mr. Furman. Mrs. Thomas. Mrs. Stemler.
Tim?
Motion passes 5-2.
Okay, moving on to the president's report. I know on the agenda tonight, there are committee appointments, and just following past practice, I'm going to send out an email explaining these different entities of committees that you can sign up for. And what I'm going to do is ask all of the board members to just get back in touch with me in the next couple weeks after you have an explanation of what each one is, what's expected, and then I'm going to ask you to list your top 2 that you would like to be a part of, and we will then have committee appointments at the next meeting in January at the first meeting, okay? Next will be the superintendent's report.
First thing under my report is the Gilhart Scholarship. When the board approved that scholarship, we that night had a conversation about in the first year or so after we put it in place, which we did last spring, we would have a conversation with the board and talk about how it's going. There are 2 things I want to update the board on. One thing that the high school team has asked wasn't in the board-approved criteria, but I wanted you to be aware that we're going to make that change, is the renewal scholarships deadline is going to align with, we're going to change it. We had it in the procedures of when the renewals are going to be due, but we're going to change it to align with all the other scholarships that are renewable, as most of the other ones are due earlier in the spring by about the time that colleges end before our school year is over. And this one isn't right now renewable until June. So we're going to back that up and make them all align. So we're handling them all at the same time. So you need to know that. The other thing is that Mr. Enders and I are going to be meeting with Woodlands Bank soon and getting an update about the fund itself and how the fund is doing. So I wanted the board to be aware that we're planning to have that meeting in December and see how it's gone in the first about 18 months. Questions about that?
I have a question. Do you have any idea what the interest rate that's earning at this present time? Was it locked up for a year, I believe?
Those funds were all invested by Woodlands in their trust department, so it's not in a CD or anything like that. It's invested in the market.
Mutual funds, more or less.
Primarily mutual funds.
The only reason I brought that up is because I know most institutions are given 5 to 5.4%, so I don't know, be interested to see what those funds are doing at Woodlands then. You'll have that report next year, or the beginning of the year, January, or not?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me further go on. Is that, how long is that locked up for? Imagine a mutual fund like that, you could probably withdraw it anytime without a penalty?
Yes, what we'd have to do is look at the agreement with Woodlands when the board selected those and see if there was any term in that. That'd be the only thing that would tie us up to that.
All right, I'll wait.
Any other questions? And so then I'm going to recognize Mr. Mincer to talk about girls wrestling.
Thank you all for having me here tonight to speak about this new and exciting program that we're hoping to offer to our female students at the high school. So we're looking to offer a girls wrestling program. It would correspond with our boys' current wrestling program that we have. I have a handout. I don't know if I able to hand this out to everyone that I created. I did initially send one out earlier, but some things have changed because of the timing of the approval process for this. So I did update it here today so it more reflects what the cost would be currently. see, there's a budget on the second sheet. The first sheet is just a write-up of it. Right now, we currently have eight girls that have came out for wrestling. They're currently wrestling on our boys' team. The way that PIAA did it, since this is a new program that's just approved this year, is they're allowing, if we do not have a girls' team approved, they're allowing the girls to wrestle with the boys' team. And once we are approved for a girls' team, or if we have a girls' team, they would have to declare whether or not they're going to be on the boys' team or the girls' team, and then they can go forward from there. District 4 is holding its own District 4 women's and men's wrestling program, our district championship this year. So one of the things that we would like to do with having this wrestling program is giving our girls an opportunity to wrestle against other girls that they may face in districts so that they can have those opportunities to be better prepared for that. So as you can see, I'm not going to read down through all this, but as you can see, the costs initially are very low. As I said, most of the time, the girls program would travel with the boys program, so the junior high program would wrestle, and then between the varsity and the junior high program, the girls programs would wrestle. So for all intents and purposes, you're looking at maybe another hour on to some of our staffing. So security, I estimate $28 per home match, roughly about $60 per home match for auxiliary, and the $32 is what our league requires for a double duel, is what I qualify that as, with a girls varsity match and a boys varsity match for wrestling. So it'd be $32 extra for officials. So when you're looking at transportation, there are 3 chances for the girls to wrestle right now that would be aside from the boys. The first one would be districts. So the girls would have to have their own transportation for that. It's in Williamsport. It wouldn't be that expensive. I think I had it down around $282, but I can't be completely sure on that. But for all the trips that we would take, Baltimore area is doing an individual tournament for girls only in January, late January. And then Williamsport is also doing one for our league in early February. So this would also give our girls another opportunity. So that's the biggest expense for the program, right there, is the transportation to those 3 events. Roughly, and this is probably a little bit high because it's not going to be an 8-hour trip, but that's what I asked them to budget me for, was an 8-hour trip to all these places. So it's a little bit high. I don't know that some of the schools are going to have 1 or 2 girls for wrestling. Other schools like us will have more like 8 or 9 or 10. I don't know that, Cross, do you know if anybody's going to have like a full lineup?
Almost a full lineup.
Okay.
Not only has like 7.
So you're looking between really 1 and then 13. So, but for the most part, I think we're going to probably be running in that 5 to 8 range. And then entrance fees for those 2, not the district tournament, but those 2, the PHAC girls meet and then the Baldigo area meet. Because of the lateness, I did have a 15-point schedule for this, but if we're not going to approve this until January, I had to drop some of those points off. So we would be able to get a match with Selinsgrove. That's a home match. We would be able to run them between our varsity and our junior high, and Montgomery. We could run those between our varsity and junior high. We could go to Shikellamy when our boys teams go there to wrestle. And then Williamsport's probably going to be a scratch too. That's why I have that highlighted, because our next board meeting's not until January 9th. Is that correct? And that's a January 4th match. Unless we move that match, that would probably be a scratch. So those would be the individual tournament, or the individual matches. And then moving forward, there's going to be more teams that are picking this up. Mifflinburg's going to be picking it up next year. They're on our schedule. We'll be able to wrestle Central Mountain. We wrestle them tomorrow. They have a program. We won't obviously be able to wrestle them with their girls program tomorrow, but so there'll be more matches moving forward. But this is I think, a good start to the program. It's between a 9 and a 10-point schedule, depending on if I can get another individual match. So the information's there for you. Does anybody have any questions?
You said that they'd have to choose choice, the girls would have to choose boys or girls. Is that just this year?
Yes, this is the only year they're going to, well, they could choose it moving forward. They could wrestle with the boys team moving forward, but they can't start. That'll be like at the beginning of the year. Now they're allowing us to do this whenever we get the program involved. That's because this is a new program. But they can wrestle with the boys team next year if they wanted to, or they could wrestle with the girls team. Yeah, the girls, like if we, yeah, if the girls wrestle against varsity, other varsity girls and not, then we would, that would count as points for our varsity team. So our varsity team's already at the max, so, they have to wrestle boys against boys programs right now.
If they have an established girls program, and if we wrestle girls against their program, like, let's say we're in a tournament, and they wrestle girls, we lose 3 points on the boys' team. They're kind of like taken away from the boys' team if you don't have a girls, if you wrestle girls against girls. Unless they're on the boys' team, then they can wrestle girls.
Right now, currently,
Now.
because we don't have a girls' team. So they could only wrestle girls that are on boys' teams.
So once
Couldn't
we
wrestle
establish
girls.
a team, that changes or doesn't change?
They get their own points.
Well, yeah, the girls will have their own points. So the girls would have 22 points for, essentially, to wrestle. But they can only wrestle girls. So, but Mary's asking, yes, once we establish a girls' team, they would have to make a choice. If they want to stay with the boys' team, they're welcome to stay with the boys' team. If they want to wrestle with the girls' team, they have to make that choice at that point and go to the girls' program.
And next year it could be the same thing?
Yes.
That I don't understand. Sorry.
Okay.
Do we do that with our other sports? So
We do that with our other
soccer,
sports?
basketball, they
We
can make
do
a
not.
choice whether they, okay.
We do not.
And then I'm having a problem.
Not. Not. Maybe I misspoke. Maybe we wouldn't be allowed to do that, but I have a hard time believing that they wouldn't allow a girl to wrestle with the boys program because of the nature of the sport moving forward. I have a hard time believing that wouldn't happen. I don't think that girls here probably would do that. I think we'd probably have most of them stay with the girls program. I think if we had a girls program several years ago, we probably would have had a couple of state champions. And that would have been great for them, but I
So
think.
you need to get that verified through PIAA, because that's important to know.
Okay, I can have that. Any other questions?
I just have a question. There are biological males identifying as females. Will they be permitted to wrestle on a female team?
I don't have an answer for that. I don't have an answer for that. I wouldn't even be able to answer that.
I believe the rule is what you were born, how you were born, what you classified as you were born, as you have to wrestle in the state of Pennsylvania. I hope so.
I don't think the PIAA has that rule.
Oh, no,
I don't think they do. But I don't know that for a fact. That's probably more of a local district policy.
Oh, there's another question on that.
All right. Is there any other questions related to the wrestling program?
I have a question, couple questions, Bill. These girls have been practicing already
Yes,
with the boys at the
Yes.
same time?
yes.
How many girls?
8.
8 now? And I guess the weight classes are a lot less than what the boys are, weight-wise?
They're different.
How many weight classes?
There's still 13.
How many?
13.
Same as,
Same as the boys.
just lighter weight?
Yeah.
No coaching? You're the coach?
Well, as of right now, we have an assistant helping us. Raven Durr helps us out with the girls. She's a volunteer assistant right now.
Okay. I see there's no coaches listed here as cost.
Yeah, that's why, that's one of the ways I tried to keep the costs down for initial start of the program, is to use the coaching staff that we currently have in place to coach this program, and then move forward with that.
Mr. Minzer? Do you have a projected what this would cost for a full year once the program started?
It's in the budget for next year. I put it in the budget for next year. It's gonna roughly be the same because they're gonna travel the same. I didn't add a coach to the program, so there's gonna be a couple more, gonna be maybe a couple $600 to $800 more in tournament fees that I added onto our budget for next year. But other than that, it shouldn't be too much more expensive. It's not gonna have a separate line item. At this point anyways, I didn't put it in as a separate budget. I just kept it in with wrestling.
Okay, thank you.
So when you see the wrestling budget, when you see my budget, that'll be included in that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Minzer, how many schools in our area do offer the women's wrestling?
That's a great question. I have that answer, but I didn't bring it with me. Williamsport does, Central Mountain does, Greenfield does, Montgomery does. Muncie? Muncie?
They just approved it.
Yeah. So Selinsgrove, Shikellamy, Midwest, some of them, Montague area, Bellefonte. There's quite a few. There's more than enough schools. And most of the teams in our division and our league will be offering a girls program moving forward. So that would be an easy fit there.
There's not going to be any struggle then with filling.
No, I'll be able to get a
Or schedule.
22-point schedule for them moving forward. Yeah.
Ladies, how do you feel about this?
We want it strongly.
Strongly want it?
There's lots of schools around us that are getting this approved. A lot of them haven't been approved last year before it was even competitively sanctioned. So it would just be very nice for us to get the competition that we deserve in a way, because now we have the opportunity to go to states and stuff if we get this approved. So the sooner we get the wrestling time and experience on the mat against other girls, the better it will work out for us.
I applaud you for being here and pushing for what you guys want. It's good to see you here. You're welcome. Thank you, Mr.
You're
Mitzer.
welcome. Is there any other questions? All right, I'll get those questions answered and send that to Dr. Almer, and he can send that out to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minzer.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I want to recognize our student board rep is here. If you have anything you want to update the board on.
I do not have a report.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. That's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Almer. Okay, next we will have courtesy of the floor. Those that have signed up, which they're...
Nobody, because that's a non-voting agenda item. They can talk at the end.
Got it. So I know that Isabel Gutschall signed up this evening, but since we are not voting on this, this will not be an actual agenda item where you will be able to speak at this time, but you can speak in the end on the next courtesy of the floor. All right. Under,
Is there anybody that wants to speak on voting agenda?
that didn't
Just to
sign
double
up?
check, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Is there anybody that would like to speak on any of the agenda items this evening? If you would, you have 3 minutes and you can come forward.
It's just the.
Just the calendar.
Either way, if you want to speak on the calendar, you are more than welcome to do so. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to miscellaneous. Under miscellaneous, we have the calendar of the board meetings. Dr. Almer, do you want to?
I will point out a couple things. It does mirror this year, with the exception of, I believe it's May. April's meetings are a little earlier, and we need to meet earlier because of the timing of the state requirement for your approval of a budget in May. So I moved May's meetings after talking through it with Mr. Enders to the first and the third Mondays. You still have 2 weeks between the April meeting and the first May meeting, and it gives you time to pass the budget in May and avoid Memorial Day and get it submitted in time.
Any questions from the board members on the calendar?
I have one. There was, when I looked at it, at the bottom it said about the capital projects meetings. So you had them scheduled for 4:30. Were you going to keep them at that, or were you going to keep it so the public could come to them like we've done in the past?
So we have it on there as 4:30, and what I talked to Mrs. Stemler about is if, after the committee is approved, and we can talk to, after the committee is selected and we have that, one of the conversations that Mrs. Thomas and Mrs. Stemler and I had is, it's hard to know where we need them and what time until we have the committee established. But I put them on there with the dates and times just so that we can advertise once. If we want them to be there, you've already advertised them. If we want to move them, we would advertise one more time. I'm just trying to streamline your costs.
Well, I would suggest that we make it at 6 o'clock. because there are people on this board that like to come to those, and some of them work, and they're not gonna make it at 4:30. So make it one time, and I make a motion that we change those capital project meetings to 6 o'clock.
Is the rest of the board okay with that?
I'll second that motion if you need it.
So, Mr. Brumgard seconded.
All those in favor of having the meeting at 6 o'clock, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. And now I need a motion to approve the actual calendar. Can I have a motion, please?
Second.
Are there any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Next is old business. Anything under old business?
I have a couple things nobody else does. I don't know how to put this, but to make myself aware and the new board members aware of where we're headed next year, I'd like a breakdown of the 5-year agreement that was just ratified by the previous board. Somehow, take the highlights of some of the highlighted points like FMLA, see what's going on from the first year, the second year, third year, some kind of a column explanation of it, like a insurance, co-pay insurance and stuff, what it was the previous contract, I think a 9-12%, something like that, what it's going to be year 24, 25, 25, 26, right on out. Some of the personal days, reimbursement for conferences from year to year over the next 4 or 5 years. So we know what we're looking at ahead and which direction we're gonna go, for one. Is that possible, Mr. Under? Should be. Maybe take the previous contract that we had. I don't know what the percentage of increase was for pay, and maybe take that as a total, and then take the comparison for the first year coming up, the total percentage of pay over the 5 years, compare that. I mean, every little thing that's in the contract that's kind of relevant to the cost to the school district.
I can share what we shared with the previous board first, and you can, how about we start there? I'll share what we shared internally with the board, and you can let me know if there's additional information you're looking for.
Share it at a public meeting,
Or do you want it to be public, or you want to look at it first?
I kind of like to be public so we could discuss
Okay.
it. I don't care. It's up to the rest of the board. Doesn't matter to me. I mean, I would probably know what I'm looking at through the contract. I'm not so sure the new members would be able to pick out things that the contract, like, some things you gotta give to get something back. And I just wanna see what was given and maybe what the association gave back from year 1 to year 5 of the contract. And I don't know if you could put a cost on that or not. You might be able to, because you know what the co-pay is gonna be, you know what the increase of pay is going to be, you know what reimbursement is, and I'm sure Mr. Anders could do that.
The co-pay piece, Mr. Bernard, it's written very similar to the previous contract that I know you're aware of. It's based on the annual increase to the premium. Determines if the copay is going to increase or not increase. That's how the old contract was written as well.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can give you next year's, well, I can project out next year's based on what the estimated increase in premium is. The premium is determined in February.
Yeah, that's kind of set for the next X number of years.
No, it goes
No,
year
it's
to year.
year by year.
Oh, it's
Health insurance premium goes year to year.
The
So-
copay.
No, well, that's what I'm saying, is the copay, just like the last contract, the increase in it is determined on whether or not there's an increase in that year's cost,
Right, okay.
okay?
All right,
So, I mean, I can give you, 24, 25, an estimate what that one is, and that's the basis for all the years going forward,
okay.
okay?
You understand what I'm looking for, basically. Okay, then, along with that, the second thing, I know you've done this in the past, I was on the board previously. Could you make a budget projection for the next 4 or 5 years? A lot of these costs are set, I know you can estimate the state, federal reimbursement, things like that. In other words, take this year's budget and then project it out 4 or 5 years and just see where we're gonna stand as far as fund balance and everything else goes.
Yeah, I can make that as part of the whole budget process as we go forward the next couple
I know
months.
we had that before, that was very helpful. Okay, the last thing I have here that I was looking at previously, the Act One index, 7.3%. I know it was ratified. You know, to me, that's a very high number from what I'm used to seeing, usually around 2-3%, something like that. And I understand that's, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's basically passed down from the governor.
Right.
And that's based on, I believe, inflationary wages within the district. Somewhat.
Last year it was
Yes or no?
last year was 5.6.
I'm not aware of them gathering inflationary salary information to determine our Act One index.
Maybe Google's wrong, I don't know.
I mean, there's different matrices in the Act One index that determine the adjustment from the statewide Act One that's set. And some of that is it's the market value aid ratios and things like that.
Right, there's a lot of other variables that go into it, but bottom line is, what does that actually equate to in terms of revenue? If we actually went to that index,
It's over $1 million of increase of revenue.
$1
Based
million
on,
increase, in other words.
yes, I calculated it for the last meeting. Give me a second, I can tell you the exact number.
So what would that relate to in assessed value of property values per $100,000? Could you relate it to that somehow? $1 million of increased revenue is gonna be a lot if we go to that index. I'm thinking we're looking at I'm not gonna say it.
It's
Yeah,
about,
you're a little
Big
early.
tax increase.
it's
we go that high.
it's about a 1 mil increase in, now, I'm going to say this in this manner. I used last year's assessed values, because I don't have updated assessments from the counties yet, when I calculated this, okay? And that's a key point.
Right,
So, based on that, as a very rough estimate, it's just over $1 mil increase to Clinton County, and it's just over $1.5 million to Lycoming County.
wow.
Okay.
So per assessed value, then, can you equate that to a money value? Per 100,000 is what it's usually based on, right, your tax millage?
Yeah, I believe, simple math in my head, it's about $100 per 100,000. $100 for Clinton and $150 for Lycoming per 100,000.
154.
150
FOR.
for
FOR. On 150.
But it's $1,037,986 increase in real estate taxes at the index using last year's assessed values.
Can you repeat that number, please?
$1,037,986 increase in real estate taxes. Again, using last year's assessed values. Because the other key point there was that the county that hit the index first was Clinton County, based on that's based on those assessed values. As you know, once one of the counties hits the index, you're done.
Right. Okay, just curious how that worked.
But I want to leave that conversation with the public hearing. We didn't do that. Because I don't want anybody to leave here thinking that it was voted that we're giving them a 7.3% tax increase.
No, I mean, that's.
I just want to make sure that is said out loud, so
Right,
that's
you can-
not the headline tomorrow in the
You can raise it up to
newspaper.
that amount. Hopefully, we don't have to, but.
Right. All that we said so far was we're not going above what the state said we could. That's all we said.
But you're still equating it to $100 per $100,000, basically, average, somewhat.
If, at the index.
If you go to the index, 7.3%. If we go below that, it's gonna absolutely be less.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's clear. I understand that. I was just curious what the monetary value was.
Anybody else under old business? Okay, hearing none, we will now have courtesy of the floor.
Do you want to start with, never mind.
You'll have 3 minutes to please state your name and where you're from.
Bob Pryor, Mifflin Township. That's what I like about our director from Region 3. He asks the hard questions. Thank you. Congratulations to the new board members in winning a hard but well-run campaign. You chose the high road honorably. It's pleasing to me to see new faces that I know will take a common sense, I've been preaching that forever, previous board, common sense approach to solving problems. My advice to the new board is know the difference between needs and wants. Use the district's resources to the fullest in a fiscally responsible manner. And this is especially for the previous president of the last board. With your elections to this board, the taxpayers have finally been heard. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor.
Mr. Howell, can you wait just 1 minute? We had a young lady sign up for the previous courtesy of the floor. And I just thought it would be courtesy to give her an opportunity.
I have no issue with courtesy, however, I do have an issue with pushing what was on the agenda off the agenda, because it was actually, she should have spoken at that time when she signed up. I'll yield.
We're the girls from the wrestling team. We're trying to be our own team, but currently can't really have that. But we've been practicing just as hard. It's EIA double, it's approved. And if the girls' team's approved, more girls will be inclined to join, because some people would rather not wrestle boys. I mean, we know that we wouldn't really, that's not in our best interest. As of now, we can't go to tournaments, we can't have any matches, and we can't really improve without having those right now. And we also can't really do anything for our team that we want to have. But, I mean, if you guys have any questions, we'd be glad to answer them. The best way for all of us to learn is from experience with other people at our levels. A lot of the girls that we have out now are just joining now because of it being approved and putting wrestling out there more for girls. So a lot of them are first years, so it's hard for us to learn from each other when not a lot of us know stuff. So the best way to learn is to go out and do matches, go to tournaments against other girls that we don't see every single day in the same mat room. And we don't really have that opportunity to do that as much because we can't go do matches against other girl teams because we don't officially have one. And we can't wrestle against boys without losing points and stuff. So it's just kind of a lose-lose for us at the moment. So the best thing for us would be to just get an official girls team.
I just wanted to add, I've been wrestling for 7 years now, and I've always had to wrestle with the boys. And I felt that I can't really improve with them, just the fact they're stronger, they're more experienced than I am, and it's been really difficult to improve myself. I've never been able to go to states. I haven't been able to do anything, and like they said, most of these girls joined for the sole purpose that other schools have approved it, and we thought that we would be able to get that same opportunity. And I understand it takes time, but it's just, I think it's a really growing sport, and I think it would be really successful here.
Have any of you other girls wrestled from the elementary age?
I did.
So I just want to let the board know, if you haven't seen, there are quite a few other young girls on the elementary wrestling team. And this is very inspiring to me because this gives those girls a place to look at and say, hey, you know, the girls at the high school are fighting for our futures in this athletic sport. So again, thank you very much for coming here.
Can I add one thing? I've been wanting to do it for years, but my parents always pushed me not to because we don't have an official team. They were afraid that I would be like wrestling guys, and they don't want. Wrestling is a very physical type of sport, and they were afraid like it was going to be uncomfortable. And the only reason why I'm wrestling this year is because we have the group of girls that we do have. And I feel like it would expand if we did have an official team, because it would be like an eye-opening to parents, like, hey, you know, my child is wrestling other girls and not, you know.
I have a quick question, girls. You're all on the high school team? How many are on the junior high team?
Five?
Five, I'll say amount.
I think there's 5 or 6 in elementary as well.
Yeah, we have about like 5.
As Kayla said, there might be more girls interested if you had a team, maybe.
We had
Yep, that's exactly
12 signed up, but once we were told last year that the girls' team was not going to be approved, this is what we have left.
We had a lot more interested, but once they found out there was talk of us not having an official girls team at the beginning of the season where they'd have to be on the boys team, a lot of them dropped off and decided against it.
Okay.
Thank you,
Mr.
girls.
Minzer, this might be a question for you. So these are high school girls. Is there any way to get a junior high girls wrestling team as well?
There is, there's just not as many schools that have that right now,
Okay.
so it would be, we absolutely could do it, because we could just travel and with them as we currently. If we had a separate girls and boys, our girls junior high and varsity program, and the program continued to expand, I think we would probably need to set that aside as a different budget, but we could still keep it with boys and girls soccer in the same budget as boys, but there would need to be more money added to that just to cover costs of coaching. And more than likely at that point, there probably would be some situations where we wouldn't be traveling, more situations where we wouldn't be traveling together. And I did look up to answer the one question about biological males.
Can you approach the podium for that answer, please?
So the PIAA has said that it's up to the school's principal to determine what that child is not wrestling, because it wasn't specific to wrestling, but what gender that child would be with after talking to the parents. So it's up to the school principal. I did email the PIAA to ask them specifically what their ruling would be on that, or what their discussion would be on that, but like I said
previously. I think what it's gonna end up being is gonna be a local decision, so it would be something that you all would have to decide. And I think, same with your question, Mary, I think it'd probably be the same thing. But I did ask those 2 questions, so I just wanted to say, there is an article, I sent it to Mr. Armbruster. But it was a decision made in July of this year. So, you're welcome.
And I just want to add one more thing. We do really want this. We are working hard, and we just want to be able to, show people what we've learned, improve ourselves, and currently we can't really do much of that. But we do really, really want this.
Thank you all for
Thank you,
being here.
girls.
Thank you for
Yes,
coming.
thank you for coming. Would Isabel Gutschall like to speak, or was that one of the girls? That was you. Okay, I wasn't 100% sure, so thank you. Okay, Mr. Helm, thank you for being patient and waiting.
Yes,
I
thank you,
appreciate
Mr.
that,
Helm.
and I appreciate everything they had to say. I, certainly support their endeavor, and I think that the board should also consider that. My son wrestled, and I know he found it very uncomfortable when he had to wrestle a girl on the wrestling team. So I know he had those concerns, so I can see where their concerns are and where your male wrestlers would have those concerns. Getting back to part of why I'm here, I noticed new faces on the board. Elections do have results, some positive, some negative, depending on where you sit and how you look at it. Would welcome all of the new board members and just offer a little bit of insight and some things that, we as the public, we sit out here at times, often in the dark, and I noticed that one of the new members actually started asking some questions and creating some dialogue, and that would provide answers to the members of the public as well. And there are many of the questions that we had, so I appreciate that. One of the things that I did prior to coming here tonight is I looked up the word transparency. It's something I've pushed for. It's something that everybody should ask for. And what we see is a lot of executive sessions here before and after each meeting and so on and so forth. And what we don't get is any of the details. And I understand that there are certain things that are required to be done out of the public's eye. But this is a public meeting where the public should be informed of what's going on with the district. We are the investors here. So transparency, and it's sort of a definition that I prefer. The quality of being done in an open way and without secrets. So, I would ask that each of you challenge yourself to keep everything in the open. Also, ask yourself or remind yourself that you're here. Are you here for the right reasons? Focus on the education, focus on fiscal responsibility to the community and to the school, and not politics. You guys all have to work together. You guys, it's going to be a long, hard road if you don't all find a way to work together in solving some of the issues that we face. Keep the community's best interests at heart and at focus. Your community entrusted you to provide the best educational opportunities to students while also balancing those costs borne by property owners. I'll remind you that currently your budget's around $47 million. And if you multiply that by 10 years, that's $470 million. 10 years. You all are responsible. So ask yourself where you see this district in 10 years with that kind of investment. And it's only going to go up. I've never seen it go down. It's not really going to go down. And some of the questions that were asked by the board member in relation to the Act 1 index being at 7.3%, it's equal to 1.5 mil in Lycoming County if you hit the index, which I don't honestly see how you're going to do your budget for next year without hitting the index. But you also need to be aware that Lycoming County is currently considering a reassessment. And what that does is that adds to that 7.3%. It's going to increase property values and it's going to increase taxes. And you're already talking about inflation and other things that are driving the economy locally. You guys are part of it. So just keep those things in mind. That's all I'm asking. And good luck in the next year.
Thank you, Mr. Helm.
Wayne Kinley, Mifflin Township. I congratulate all the new board members as well as new leadership. I think moving forward, I think this board has a real challenge. The previous board, the majority of the previous board was really not concerned with cost savings, as evidenced by the vote on school consolidation and the teacher's contract. I think the vote was 6-3 on the consolidation and 5-4 on the teacher's contract. The teacher's contract, I think, the questions that were brought up tonight would be very interesting, especially for the new board members, to look at the comparison of the previous contract with the current contract and see how much the school district gave and how much they received back from the teachers. The current teacher's contract is very lucrative in favor of the teachers. And what that translates into is some big dollars that need budgeted for the next 4 years. Mr. Enders projected $850,000 of new money for the 24-25 year. The board, we can't keep taking money out of fund balance. That is a slippery slope that is not sustainable. I think the board needs to look at anything else that they can save money on. For every dollar that is spent beyond reasonableness falls back to the taxpayers. That's the way it is. It has been discussed tonight how much potentially, if we go to the index, additional revenue will be generated. But what does that do to the $100,000 home in Lycoming County? 150 bucks. Think about 200,000, 300,000. I think the last couple of years we've taken money out of fund balance. Can't keep doing that. Need to find a way to balance the budget. The only revenue you have control over basically is real estate taxes. So you've got to find ways to cut expenses or to hold expenses in line. Teacher's contract, in my opinion, is going to create a real problem the next 3 or 4 years. You got to live with it now, but it's going to create major problems as far as tax increases and trying to balance your budget. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kinley.
Brian Gephardt, Pike Township. Board members, this evening I'd like to discuss several issues in my son's classroom. My son attends Salisbury Elementary School. From the first day of school, I've been hearing reports of inappropriate behavior within his classroom. To name a few examples, a student running around the classroom constantly flipping desks, emptying shelves, and shoving classmates' belongings to the floor. I also have 2 other children at this school. They have told me that they have seen the same student running down the hallway during class time, turning the hallway lights on and off, and running into their own classrooms, turning on lights on and off. My son's class often must leave their classroom for either the hallway or the library to try and resume normal teaching activities, while the student terrorizes the classroom and de-escalates. My kids say that there are constant calls over the loudspeaker for backup teachers and faculty to help regain control over the situation. And recently they have even recruited the school secretary to help them. At one point, all the students in my son's class, except for the one, had a secret code word. When the code word was spoken, all the students were taught to stop whatever they were doing, go back to their desk, and put their heads down, so not to witness the chaos that was happening. I have reached out multiple times following the district's chain of command in accordance with policy 906 for answers. Some of my emails have gone unanswered, and on some of the phone calls, the only reply I get is, "I'm not going to discuss your son's class with you." Multiple times in these calls and emails, I have expressed concern over education and safety. Tragically, the day after one of these phone conversations, the teacher was knocked to the ground, and from what I understood, they had to go to the hospital to get x-rays. A few weeks later, another student was tackled to the ground. On November 17th, my son was tackled and had his head jumped on. Now my son is a direct victim of this lack of accountability and inaction. I was asked by faculty if I thought the teacher is struggling. The answer is a simple yes, although I don't believe it's from lack of experience or that they are a bad teacher. Quite the opposite. The teacher has been at this very school for over 25 years. I have 2 older children who went through this teacher's classroom and loved every minute of it. This teacher needs help and support. They need people reaching out to see what they need, lift them up, give them positive reinforcement, and to listen to them. I can tell you that this teacher does not deserve to be punished. Every school morning I drop my kids off at the door to the school. I watch them get out of my truck, walk through the school doors, and I watch the doors lock behind them. I must drive away knowing that for the next few hours they're in the hands of the school district, that you are now in charge of their education and safety, that you in this very room, making decisions, are changing the lives of my children. My son is young. He has many years of school ahead of him, along with his classmates. I believe the issues we are facing now are only going to increase as the years progress. Please do not sit idle by until this turns into problems we can no longer fix. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gephardt.
Rebecca Freezer, Anthony Township. My son attends the same class, it was just referenced. And as he mentioned, there have been major behavioral issues since day one. My son will come home and tell me that there was chairs being carried on heads. This student in question has run through him when they're in circle time. He's been evacuated to the music room multiple times. The student has gotten out of the school that my child has witnessed. This same student allowed a citizen from the community into the school with the adult did not say it was okay. That puts every single individual in that school in danger. I have sent emails, I have met in person, and I have had phone calls, and the only response I get is we have a plan in place. My son came home today and asked me to put him in a new school because he cannot focus on his schoolwork. He is made to sit in an ongoing circus every single day where he is supposed to be getting his foundational education. We have multiple friends in the other classroom who their students are witnessing lights being shut off in the entire school. They're witnessing this child run out of the cafeteria. Somebody is going to get seriously injured and the school district is going to be liable for that because nothing was done. And I think something needs to be done immediately before something else happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fraser. Anybody else for courtesy of the floor? All right, courtesy of the floor is closed, and we will adjourn the meeting this evening.
I'd like to request an executive session. For safety reasons.
Okay.
It's until the middle of January, our next meeting.
Does she need a second?
I was just,
I second that.
Since that motion was seconded, all those in favor of having an executive session, please say aye. All those opposed? There will be no business conducted after the executive session, and tonight's meeting is adjourned.